Welcome, guys, to Kieran's Corner, and once again, back for everyone's favourite series, Your Team, Your Say. And today we have possibly my favourite Browns fan on earth, and that's Shaun. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. Not biased in that selection at all, there, mate. I'm glad to see, but yeah, it's great, mate. We haven't spoken for a long time, and it's strange for you to introduce me on the podcast, mate. It's very nice. I'm very, very privileged to be in your little corner, my friend.
Oh, thank you very much, mate. Yeah, it's been a while since we've done a proper NFL podcast after the season ended, but today we get to solely talk about the Browns, which is gonna be a lot of fun. You know, I've been big on this team for a while, so without further ado, guys, welcome to Kieran's Corner.
Kick it and go, kick it and go. We'll slip on, spin, move, in zone, let's go. Off the sideline, a touchdown, I put on a show. Kick it and go. I had to kick off and go. Kick it and go. I had to kick off and go. We'll slip on, spin, move, in zone, let's go. Off the sideline, a touchdown, I put on a show. Kick it and go. I had to kick off and go.
So, thanks for watching through the intro again. We'll get that changed now. I've had a haircut, I assume. But we're here to talk about a team that throughout the season, Shaun, I was kind of singing their praises, to be honest. And I may have seemed a little bit biased. And we'll get to the beautiful moment we shared on WhatsApp in the postseason. but let's just start at the logical start point for this, the off season, because the season before last was it wasn't great. I'm gonna be honest with you. Probably the most underachieving team in the league. How did you feel after that season?
Like you say, the expectations were sky high, weren't they? We'd obviously come off the back of a pretty decent end to the previous campaign. Greg Williams obviously took over on an interim basis, seemed to get a tune out of the squad, and things seemed to be trending in the right direction. There was plenty of talent there, as everybody knew. I mean, I don't think talent's been an issue for the Browns now for a few years, to be fair. It's been getting the right guy in place to bring that all together and bring it to life. But Greg Williams, to be fair to him, got a lot of things that I don't like about the guy, but certainly in that period of that sort of couple of months, he seemed to get a tune out of the team. But obviously, they decided in the off season to give Freddie Kitchens the head coaching gig, and hindsight's always 2020. I think most fans at the time were relatively comfortable with it. He got a lack of experience, but he'd never called offensive plays before he stepped in for the couple of months that he did, and no one complained at the time with the sort of results that were being generated. So I think most fans were relatively happy. Obviously, then you had the big name acquisition of OBJ, and expectations were sky high. And I think you said it yourself, mate, whether they were the biggest underachievers or whether they were just the most overhyped in the off season. I think you could look at it two directions, couldn't you? The hype wasn't necessarily justified. You've always got to go and actually do it out on the field before you sort of get the accolades and the recognition. But certainly it was below expectations. A really poor season. So yeah, there was plenty of question marks this time 12 months ago, mate. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was weird because I kind of feel like the narrative going into this season, which probably as a Browns fan you're pretty pissed off with, but every media outlet, whenever they brought up the Browns, were saying, "Oh, is it time to move on for Baker Mayfield if he doesn't have a good season or whatever?" And he'd never had coaching stability until this season, and now you get a stable head coach in Kevin Stefanski, who, in my opinion, was right up there, coach of the year. So he was right up there with guys like Brian Flores, who'd really taken a bunch of talent that had no direction and turned them into a force. So let's start with Baker Mayfield. The progression he went through. He obviously broke records in his rookie season and everything looked on the up. And then 2019 was kind of a, real down year like we just talked about. But look at his progression over the course of, from one season to the next. And I don't know if it's just Stefanski figuring out how to use him, Stefanski being there. And, the joke in the 2019 season was that he had more progressive commercials than touchdowns. And going into the 2020 season, he obviously had a massive upkick in production. I know the touchdown, it's only 4 more touchdowns, but it's significantly less turnovers. And, okay, a few less yards, but you also added another running back in Kareem Hunt. What do you think What did you think of Baker Mayfield going into the 2020 season? Did you expect him to have a better year, or was this kind of take you a surprise that he played as well as he did?
I think Baker did enough in his rookie season to give people plenty of reason for hope and for optimism. He came in, let's not forget in his rookie season, very similar situation to what's just happened with Justin Herbert at the Chargers. He was supposed to sit behind Tyrod Taylor. Obviously, Tyrod Taylor, got injured in a Browns game, and Baker came in and never looked back from that moment on. So very, very similar situation. Didn't get a lot of reps there for during training camp and all of that kind of stuff. And as with a lot of young players, when they come in, there isn't the film study on them and all of that type of thing. And Baker was able to thrive on the back of that. Like I say, the expectations were huge for that 2019 season. He got a new shiny toy to play with in OBJ. The relationship never seemed to quite hit it off, certainly not in the way that people expected that it would do. And like you said, the biggest issue in the 2019 season was really that turnover number, 21 interceptions. You could also add some fumbles in there as well. There's some ball security issues. And effectively, you don't win many NFL games, regardless of the talent that you've got at your disposal, if you turn the ball over with regularity. We all know that. And that ultimately was the one of the main reasons that the Browns finished 6-10 last year. He got quite a bit of flack last season. There was a stretch when the Browns were winning games and Baker wasn't throwing for a ton of yardage. If you actually go back and look at those games, some of the weather that we played in for a 3 or 4 week stretch was just absolutely horrendous. I think there was a game against the Texans, and I think Baker and Deshaun Watson combined for less than 150 or 200 yards, something ridiculous. So we had a few weeks where throwing the ball wasn't really conducive to the game plan. As you say, we obviously got two really good running backs as well. But the big thing really there with Baker is that it's 26-8 over the course of the season. Only one of those 8 interceptions actually came in the back half of last season as well. So we're not just talking here about a jump from 2019 to 2020. We're talking about a huge jump that was made essentially from the bye week in 2020 till the end of the season, and I include the playoff run in that as well. He was obviously instrumental in the wild card win, which we'll come on to, I'm sure. And and obviously the Browns pushed the Chiefs mightily close, in the divisional round also. So massive growth. I mean, his accuracy has always been his probably biggest trait. That was the thing that lots of people talked about when he came into the league, about his ball placements and his accuracy. And the one thing, if you study Brown's film, is there's almost a little bit of an issue with some of the personnel that we've got offensively. In as much as they're all quite good at specific things, but Jarvis Landry is a classic example. He's a player that divides a little bit of opinion, and I think he divides opinion as much as anything because of the money that he gets paid. But what Jarvis Landry is excellent at, he's working the short and underneath routes. In Kevin Stefanski's system, which is a lot of two tight end, it's not really what you want your number 2 wide receiver to be doing. That's where you want your tight ends to be winning. That's why a big part of why Austin Hooper's numbers were down last year. Austin Hooper came in from the Falcons as a big free agent acquisition, another excellent receiving tight end. But you've got him and you've got Jarvis Landry trying to occupy the same portion of the field. And Baker's numbers, although impressive in their own right, if you actually look at some of the throws that he had to make, when we played the Chiefs for an example in that divisional round game, Patrick Mahomes was finding guys that were wide open. Guys hadn't got anyone 3 or 4 yards from them. The Browns played an awful lot of zone, and we'll get to the defense, particularly when we start talking draft, because that's the Browns' biggest area of need, is the defensive side of the ball. If you actually look at a lot of the Browns plays and a lot of the completions, the windows that Baker had got to operate within, and the tight ball placement that he had to deliver, there was very, very few easy throws for Baker Mayfield to have to make. And the fact that he made as many as he did, I think he's just a testament to him. He's got that bit of a brash attitude. Well, I know we're joking in terms of the progressive commercials, all right, but he's that kind of character, isn't he? When we drafted him, I think he uttered something along the lines of, "If anyone's going to turn that franchise around, it's me." And I know that's obviously what he's got to say pre-draft, but you also think that he actually genuinely believes that in the back of his mind as well. So he's one of those. He's going to rub fans up the wrong way if he's not on your team. But as a Browns fan, I say we love him. I think the vast majority of the fan base certainly do. I think there'll always be fans out there that'll, yet to be convinced and what have you. But let's put it this way: he's country miles better than anything I've seen playing quarterback for the Browns for the last 13 years or so, mate. That's for sure. So certainly looking forward to seeing what he's got up his sleeve for 2021. As you rightly say, with another full year in the same system, with the same head coach and the same offensive coordinator. We saw what he did in one season. Let's see what he can do in a couple of years in the same system, because potentially it could be very, very exciting.
Yeah, I think people fixate on numbers a little bit too much as well, because people are like, 26 touchdowns isn't extraordinary. If you actually look at the team with guys like Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, it makes sense that you're not going to be throwing for 40 touchdowns a year. And talking about when Baker Mayfield says he's the only guy who could turn this, like if anyone was going to turn the franchise around, it would be him. I think that makes sense, because you needed a guy who's not afraid to go out there, speak his mind, and be confident. And despite the talent that guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Sam Darnold undoubtedly have, less so Sam Darnold, of course, but that these guys have, everyone knows that Josh Allen's probably my favorite quarterback in the draft, but I don't think he had the personality to necessarily galvanize a team like this, a team that was forever looked at as kind of a joke for the last, 10, 15, maybe even more years, which is sad to say, because they are one of the stalwarts of the NFL. They are one of the oldest teams, and they were for a long time one of the most winning teams in the NFL. And you have some of the most legendary players in the league have played for the Browns, guys like Jim Brown, for example, and then obviously head coach Paul Brown before he went to Cincinnati and everything. He was the perfect guy almost to kind of, turn this team around. And we saw him at Indians games, cracking beers, and he was at Cavs games, and he really integrated with the city. And I think that matters a lot. We see it with Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. Like last night, he went out for dinner with Ocho Cinco, and half the city was trying to find out where they were having dinner together, and they both left $1,000 tips and stuff. So things like that really attach them to the city. But yeah, Baker's got a ton of weapons, and I think with Stefanski and you guys might make a real run this year, and maybe not Super Bowl, but definitely AFC Championship game, given that you showed that you can hang with a lot of teams, and you were very close to beating the Chiefs if it wasn't for Chad Henne just coming in, amazing play calling by Andy Reid. But let's go through the season, because you started off really slow, and I mean, a couple of the early games there. How did you feel after those early games to the Titans and the Ravens?
Yeah, the Ravens was opening day, wasn't it? And it just felt like deja vu, to be completely honest. Like you said, we're so used to not having nice things. We're so used to, being the whipping boys and all of that kind of thing. And, the Browns have really struggled with Lamar Jackson since he's entered the league. I know we're not unique in that respect, but obviously we play him twice a year. And we have really struggled every single time that we've played him. Mark Andrews had a field day, and it didn't look particularly pretty. Let's put it that way. There was an awful lot of worry after that first game of the season, because, like I say, potentially, the Browns haven't won on opening day for as long as I've watched them. I think they haven't won an opening day game for 20 odd years now, or something ridiculous. So, I suppose in that respect, it wasn't the biggest surprise in the world, but it was certainly a little bit of an eye opener. And let's not forget, this was off the back of a really disrupted off season. Appreciate every team had that, but when you're trying to integrate a new coach, new system, new players, all that kind of jazz, it obviously was far from ideal. But They turned it round a little bit. After that, they got a win Monday Night Football. I think was the opening sort of win of the season against the Bengals on the opening sort of home game. That was an important one to sort of get that out the way and get the first victory of the season. And then I think we sort of started off. I think it was about 5-3 by the time we got to the bye week. So like you say, it was relatively steady, nothing overly spectacular, but certainly at 5-3, you thought potentially this team's in with a bit of a shout if they can put a run together. And to be fair, it looked as though they were going to be relatively comfortable in the playoffs. I mean, to be fair, the AFC was so strong last year, even with 7 wildcards, it felt as though the Browns needed to keep winning just to sort of make sure that that's exactly what did happen. And we got to a Monday night game, and it was a real illustration of just how far this team had come, because the same Ravens that we'd played on opening weekend and obviously got trounced by, we played them on a Monday night. For me, it was the best game in the NFL last year. Just a phenomenal backwards and forwards. I mean, sitting here watching it in the UK at like 3:30 in the morning or whatever ridiculous time it was, even with the Browns down by 7 with like just over a minute left, I had absolutely zero concern that they were going to tie the ball game up. I was that confident with the way that the offense was playing, and lo and behold, they went and did that. My bigger concern was leaving the Ravens time, which obviously is ultimately what ended up happening. And obviously, they sort of drove down the field, and Justin Tucker, as he seems to have done on several occasions, kicked a game winner for them. But they bounced back the following week, Sunday Night Football, big spotlight game against the Giants. That was such a one-sided victory. I know the scoreboard was only something like 20 points to 6 or something like that, but it was a real dominant performance. And then you thought, well, they've only got the Jets next week, and that'll be job done. And then, of course, we had all of the COVID situation, losing the entire receiving core on the evening of the game. No excuses. You'd have liked to have thought they could have still, done a job against the Jets. They ultimately came up slightly short. I was never too critical. I don't think it can be underestimated how big of a blow that would have been and how disrupted preparations would have been. Like I say, it's such short notice. But credit to the league. I think we all criticised decisions at the time, but ultimately, let's face it, we got through 200 and odd games last year. I don't think the competitiveness was missed. I think it was still really entertaining. Despite those couple of games, the Browns won, and obviously the famous one, I suppose, was the Broncos without the quarterback playing. But obviously they failed to get the job done that week, and it of course set it all up then, didn't it? The end of season finale, as it always seems to be. Week 17 always seems to be the Steelers. It always seems to be the Steelers backups, but it always seems to be even the Steelers backups beat the Browns, and it was kind of written, wasn't it, that was still going to be the case. You just thought they're going to throw it away at the last minute, but they got the job done. Obviously, the reward was the trip to Pittsburgh. And as you said, my friend, that was quite possibly one of the greatest nights of my NFL watching life. Well, it probably is the greatest night of my NFL watching life. I wrote an article about it at the time. I'm sure we're going to come on to why the Browns and everything shortly, so I'll save the whole story. But let's put it this way: it was a long time coming. And what was it? 12 seconds into the game, and that ball goes sailing over Ben's head, and when you sort of dream about the ideal start the night before, or you wake up in the morning, you think, oh, if we could just get off to a good start, if we could just defer the kick and we could pin them deep and we can take the ball at midfield and maybe go and get 7 on the board, what a fabulous start that'll be. No one ever thinks that you're going to score a defensive touchdown with the first snap of the game on the road, your first playoff first playoff game in forever. So just an absolutely phenomenal night. Final score was probably a bit closer than it needed to be. Again, that was a lot of the Browns defense just allowing a lot of simple completions, and I think Big Ben threw for about 5 million yards that night, didn't he? Not that it mattered too much. It was a lot of it was by design. And then, of course, as you alluded to, pretty much there with the Chiefs. We'll never know. I'd have loved to have seen Baker with the opportunity to get that ball for one final time. A 5-point loss, so obviously we would have still needed a touchdown, and we'd have probably had to have drove the length of the field even if we'd have stopped any. a couple of yards short or whatever on that scramble. I know it was the fourth down call that ultimately iced that away, but let's face it, when you're scrambling on third and 13 and he's getting 12 and a half yards, it made the fourth down call a little bit more palatable, didn't it, for Andy Reid? I don't think he was trying that if it was 4th and 5 or 4th and 6. So we'll never know, but obviously a fabulous season beyond any expectations really for last season. We kind of had the 2019 season that we expected, but we had it 12 months later on. I think nobody expected that last year. We probably expected 6 and 10, 7 and 9, maybe rebuilding, see what Stefanski's got, and see where it leads to. But certainly beyond the wildest dreams last year, mate. So thoroughly excited about this season upcoming.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously it's been so long since you guys had a playoff win, and you must have felt so vindicated winning it against Pittsburgh. I remember the texts we were throwing back and forth on the WhatsApp because I hate Pittsburgh as much as the next man, and living in Cincinnati has just galvanized that hate for me. So, how did you feel? Let's start with the very first play of the game when their center sent a ball flying over Ben Roethlisberger's head. He didn't seem interested in recovering it. I'm going to be honest. And I can't remember. I think I just text you a bunch of exclamation marks or let's fucking go or whatever. How did you feel at that moment when the Browns fell on the ball in the end zone?
Just unbelievable, man. Like I said, obviously the kickoff time in the UK was 1:15 or something like that, and I've got 2 kids at home, so I'm trying my best to sort of bite my lip and not jump around and celebrate too much. But it's like I say, it was just the most unbelievable of starts, wasn't it? And I think let's not forget, and I didn't mention it when I sort of just gave the sort of brief snapshot of the season that was. This was a game without our head coach even being present. This was a game that Kevin Stefanski was watching from his basement because he contracted COVID in the week leading up to the game. So all the talk all week had been the Browns have got no chance. The Browns are going to be humiliated. They only just scraped past the backups a week ago. Now it's in Pittsburgh. They haven't got the head coach. The Pro Bowl left guard Joe Bratonio is also out. It was apparently going to be a massacre. And look, getting 7-0 up, I've seen the Browns be up in plenty of games and lose them, so I wasn't overly carried away. By the time we got to 28-0, mate, that was it. The memes were flying backwards and forwards, all the jokes were out. It was just unbelievable. And to be fair, you mentioned there about feeling sort of vindicated in terms of how long it's been. That there was a group of us last year that sort of Browns fans just sort of set up a WhatsApp group between us. And it was just such a nice evening, middle of the night, early morning, whatever you want to call it, because we're all in exactly the same position. Hardly any of us had ever seen the Browns in the playoffs. There's a few that obviously, sort of saw some of the more glory years and supported the team, in the 80s and all of that kind of thing. But obviously for a lot of us that are sort of newer fans to the NFL, none of us had ever seen a playoff game, let alone a playoff win. So to sort of be able to experience that at the same time as everybody else, witness it at the same time, share all the fun and the laughs and the jokes, and seeing Ben crying at the end of the game, just absolutely fantastic, mate. Absolutely fantastic. But it certainly whetted the appetite, mate. It can't be a one and done. We can't wait another 20 years for the next one. It's got to be something that the team obviously now strives towards year in and year out, because ultimately what last year gave us is a fabulous foundation to build from. As you said there, should the Browns be considered a Super Bowl contender? I don't see why not, if I'm being completely honest. I don't see why not.
Out there to beat the Chiefs.
Absolutely.
The Bills had the blueprint. I spoke about this with us on the live pod. The Bills did exactly what they needed to. They just didn't have the personnel to sort of pick up on the nuances and stuff and adjust coverage on the fly and adjust schemes on the fly like the Bucs did. And I think maybe that you guys do have the personnel to do that. And Grant Delpit's going to be back next year, and that's going to be huge for you. I can't understate how much. I know he's an LSU guy, and I'm going to get flack for it, but he is a great safety. And you draft well this year on defense. You guys are looking at being the best team in the AFC North, even potentially better than the Ravens, who at times seem unstoppable, but there's clearly a blueprint out there to beat them now.
Yeah, I think that look, like I said earlier, you don't deserve the hype until you've earned the hype. All right, so I'm not going to sit here and say that I think we should definitely be doing X, Y, and Z because I don't think it works that way. But as you have rightly said there's absolutely an opportunity for the Browns here to go and make some noise. It feels as though the Steelers, I wouldn't say they're going to fall off a cliff, but it feels as though that transition from the Big Ben era into the next quarterback, that obviously doesn't look like it's an obvious solution for them unless they have a really terrible year and get a high draft pick next year. Doesn't seem like an obvious solution for them there. They've obviously got issues with their running game. They've obviously got cap issues that they're trying to deal with. The Steelers, obviously, as you say, probably not as fearful as I certainly would have been 5-6 years ago. The Ravens, like you say, I think there is a way to beat the Baltimore Ravens. You've got to be strong through the middle of the field. You need speed. That's what we have lacked. That's why Lamar Jackson has absolutely ruined us. But as you say, I think, the return of Grant Delpit, who, we haven't seen him play an NFL game. I can only comment on the film that's there from college, and obviously, all the reports that suggest he's going to be an excellent fit for the scheme that Joe Woods wants to run. The free agent acquisitions from this year, John Johnson, I think he's absolutely fantastic. So he will help massively. And I think one of the most underrated free agency moves that the Browns have made. I know a lot of people have talked about the cornerbacks in terms of Hill and in terms of Johnson, in terms of the secondary, and rightly so. They come as premier players at that position, but one of the key ones for me is that one at the bottom there on the graphic, Anthony Walker, the linebacker from the Colts. Darius Leonard's the one that gets all of the fuss and all of the attention in Indianapolis. But when Anthony Walker left and when he joined the Browns, I found it very, very notable that Darius Leonard took the time to basically film a video, post it to his social media platforms, essentially thanking Anthony Walker for making Darius Leonard the player that Darius Leonard is. I think Anthony Walker is a really, really undervalued addition to that defense. We had BJ Goodson in the middle of the defense last year, and couldn't fault his effort. He quarterbacked the defense. He was a free agent acquisition last year. He brought a bit of a veteran presence. But there's a reason he signed a 1-year deal with the Browns. There's a reason he hasn't signed with somebody straight away. I hope he does sign with somebody. I wouldn't be averse to him coming back to the Browns and to play a bit more of a rotational role, but I wouldn't want him as a starting linebacker week in and week out. So I do think Anthony Walker will be an upgrade in the middle of that defense. And I think importantly, if you look at the back end, like I say, Hill, best cornerback in the league according to certain places. Obviously depends on who you want to believe, but again, I like to just watch it with my eyes. I can see for myself whenever he plays, particularly when he covers from the slot. He's excellent, and like I said, John Johnson's sort of nose for the ball. He always seems to take the right angle. He always seems to, I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Has he picked up something ridiculous like one penalty in his NFL career, or it's certainly not a huge amount.
He's been ridiculously clean throughout his career. He's very careful with the way he plays.
Exactly, and he's very, very intelligent. The safeties last year were Andrew Sendejo for most of it. To be fair to Sendejo, he was another one brought in as a veteran on a 1-year deal to add a bit of depth and rotation because of injuries to Delpit in particular. He ended up playing a far bigger role than was ever intended. The cornerback's the same. We hopefully get Greedy Williams back this year. He suffered with a terrible shoulder injury. He's been given a clean bill of health, so hopefully we can get Greedy Williams back. I mean, he didn't set the world alight in his rookie season. I think that's fair to say. But again, he's still only a very young player.
He was making big adjustments to.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he wasn't cornerback one at LSU. I mean, he was a big part of the game, but when you're lining up opposite of guys like Derek Stingley and stuff, then and Derek Stingley at the time was a freshman, and he was probably getting looked at more just because he didn't have the experience. But I was actually surprised by the impact that Joe Schobert leaving kind of had, because he seemed like he really anchored that defense. And I feel like if you guys had kept him, you maybe would have had a little more success defensively. But
I think potentially, mate. But I also think in terms of Joe Schobert, I think he was probably looking for a contract that the Browns didn't want to pay to a linebacker. I think in this particular scheme that Joe Woods wants to run, you're going to see an awful lot of three safeties, particularly now with the versatility in that safety room in Delpit, Johnson, and Ronnie Harrison's the other one that in theory should start and play quite a lot. I also think you're going to see three cornerbacks a lot of the time as well. You're going to see Hill in the slot. You're going to see obviously Denzel Ward manning one side, and hopefully, like I say, Greedy Williams on the other. We'll wait and see obviously what happens in the draft. But I think a lot of the time you're only going to have one linebacker on the field, and I just think Joe Schobert, as much as I like Joe Schobert as a player, and as you say, he was definitely the quarterback of the Browns defense. You know, he ended up signing a pretty lucrative contract in Jacksonville, and I just don't think it's a position that the Browns' current front office setup really values all that much. I think if they can sign players like I just mentioned there in terms of an Anthony Walker on a sort of 1-2 year, nowhere near the sort of 8 million, 9 million in annual salary that Joe Schobert was commanding at the time. I think the Browns, statistically, if you look at it, the Browns linebacker room was an upgrade last year. They went from Christian Kirksey and Joe Schobert, who you would argue as two individuals were probably better players potentially than BJ Goodson and, whether you want to say Sione Taki, Mac Wilson, Malcolm Smith, whoever we plugged in at linebacker, there was no stellar names there. But collectively as a unit, statistically, it performed better. And I think that's where the Browns' mind space is at. And I certainly think if they had their way, that, like I say, you will see 6 defensive backs on the field the vast majority of the time, particularly with the versatility that Harrison, Delpit, and Johnson can have in terms of playing closer to the line of scrimmage. Certainly in terms of Ronnie Harrison, he's a big dude. He's a big dude for a safety.
huge.
Yeah, he can come down and he can hit. So he'll get involved in the run game, and like I say, I just think that's the way it's trending. I think that there's a chance the Browns could go linebacker in the draft. I've seen that as a position that a lot of people have obviously identified naturally because, as I said, there's no real standout name there. If you look at the other areas of the defense, you look at the defensive line, you've got a standout name in Myles Garrett. You look at the cornerback and the secondary, you've got Denzel Ward, you've got John Johnson. The obvious hole, if you like, is in the middle of the defense. So I can see why the linebacker link is there. I also wouldn't be surprised if they don't go linebacker at all. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not till later on in the draft they might take a flyer on one.
Well, yesterday, Josh, who was picking for the Browns, he traded up to take Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who he's basically Isaiah Simmons in fact that he can play that middle of the field linebacker role, but he's incredibly fast.
Yeah,
not necessarily light, but he can play sort of that safety role. He can kind of come down and control the middle of the field as well. And I think maybe adding a guy like him would be perfect fit for you guys. And obviously you've gone up against teams like Baltimore, where he would be great at shutting down Lamar Jackson because he is fast as well. He's very quick to react. So I think linebacker would be a perfect addition for you guys, even though you do have some guys like Mac Wilson and stuff. I just think a talent like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is, too much to pass up on. But
I can see them going that way, mate. Don't get me wrong. And I think that's the beauty for the Browns. I think we're in a situation where we can take best player available on our board at the time that it falls to us. We can be aggressive, and to be honest, I loved that move that Josh made in the mock draft on the full 10 yards yesterday. We're in a position that we shouldn't need 9 draft picks to contribute to our team this year. We probably need, 2 or 3 real contributors. And if we can get 2 or 3 guys that we really, really like, whoever they are, and we've got the ammunition to go up and get them if that's what it needs to be, then as far as I'm concerned, go up and get them. For far too long, and look, it's always one of these strange arguments with Browns fans, and it always divides the fan base. We've obviously gone through this sort of analytical phase of getting future assets, and it's all about having more and more draft picks. And there's still people now that would rather trade out of the first and pick up an extra second and all this, that, and the other. And for me, we're at a stage now where look, we're on the we're on the edge of actually getting over the hump here. You know, gone are the days of needing to keep restocking and keep retooling the cupboard. The cupboard is pretty much full. All we need now is those extra few bits and pieces to really make us into a real contender. And if whether it's JOK or whoever, I think there's probably only a couple of linebackers that are likely to go in the first, and obviously Parsons is going to be well off the board by the time it comes to the Browns. I don't see him trading that far up.
That being said, there's a lot of concerns about him as a person that are kind of tanking his drafts. There's a bunch of stuff come out about potential hazing and sexual assault stuff that happened while at Penn State that could potentially tank his draft stock, and maybe that's something for the Browns to think about. But
yeah, well, I mean, let's put it this way: if that happens, then all it's likely going to do is put JOK further up the board as well. So, I think I can't see them reaching for anybody other than one of those two in terms of what they bring on the field. Obviously, not going to comment too much on the off-field stuff. Obviously, I didn't even know about it until you just mentioned it there. But for me, I think they'll go. I think they'll definitely go defense in the draft. Whether it's defensive line. Defensive line, potentially corner. I think it depends on how the board plays. I mean, wait and see. Again, what's there? But I wouldn't be surprised at any position, to be completely honest. But I do think it will definitely be defense. I think the whole draft will be quite heavily focused on the defense. I think we could do with some speed at wide receiver. I think we could do with a bit of a burner. I think we desperately missed OBJ last year when he did go down, because OBJ is the one that can stretch the field. And as I alluded to earlier in the Stefanski offense, you could do with somebody stretching the field so that the guys can work underneath. Rashard Higgins had himself a fairly nice season last year, but again, he would benefit. It's not his natural role to be the burner over the top. He's probably more your intermediate routes type thing. So I think if we can get some speed, then that would be something that I'd be looking at as well. But like I said, we're pretty much in a good position. I was going to
say, you're stacked on offense, and
it's a pretty good position.
I think you guys now, you've got a nice sort of 3 to 5 year Super Bowl window, I think, before maybe potentially guys start retiring or contract issues come up. So I think you've got like a nice little win now window, and I think you've got the personnel on offense to do it. And I mean, even so on defense, and now that you guys have got a full off season in the Stefanski system, it's, the guy came in and, had to, get everyone to relearn the entire playbook, basically, and took a franchise from severely underperforming to being a great playoff team and absolutely kicking the shit out of the Pittsburgh Steelers in the playoffs, which, okay, yeah, some of the problems there were created by the Steelers themselves, but you played defense perfectly. You picked him off, 3 or 4 times that game? Yeah. So, that was just fun to watch. I'm just putting that out there. But then you showed that you can have shootouts that Baker can win against Cincinnati. I think probably the most entertaining game of the entire year. And I know, it's the Bengals or whatever, but they're not a bad team. And with Joe Burrow there under center, him and Baker Mayfield went toe-to-toe, touchdown for touchdown. That was one of the most thrilling games all season. I think even as much fun as the battle for LA a few years ago when the Chiefs played the Rams and it was like a ridiculous 52 to 54 scoreline or so. And so you definitely have the weapons. And I think with OBJ back as well, maybe if Baker realizes that, hey, you can throw to other people, you don't have to force the ball to him. You do have guys like Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and obviously Jarvis Landry out there. And obviously Chubb and Hunt are going to be pounding that rock down their throats. You've got Austin Hooper, great tight end, David Njoku, another great tight end as well, if you ever want to come out in those 12-man sets and just ram the ball down people's throats, and then let Baker take over and just destroy people with the play action pass. I think that's something you benefit from having those two running backs. But you're definitely ready. I think you're poised to maybe take out. I think if you take out the Chiefs in the playoffs, there's nothing from stopping you from winning a Super Bowl, because that would just be the biggest shot of confidence ever, that you can beat a team that's that stacked. And I think even just beating Pittsburgh in the wildcard round got a monkey off your back, so to speak, in terms of, okay, we are a playoff team. We can win playoff games. But yeah, that brings me to my next point, because this is going to be, as a Browns fan, and a lot of people probably think, as a Browns fan getting into them, why? But how did you get into the Browns, and how did you become a Cleveland Browns fan?
Yeah, so I watched the NFL for years. It was something that I just got into on a Sunday night. I was never particularly bothered about any team as such. It just used to be what was on a Sunday evening. My mum and dad split up when I was younger. I spent a lot of time sort of like in between grandparents and that kind of stuff. And a lot of the time, I just, like I say, Sunday night, it was just something that I escaped for a few hours. I just used to generally enjoy it. It was something different and all the rest of it. I picked the Browns essentially because I think, same with most sport, when you've got a vested interest in it, all of a sudden the excitement level goes up a notch and you can ride those highs and lows. And like a number of people that I know, it was a pretty natural thing for me to pick because also for my sins, as most people that are regulars to the full 10 yards will know, I'm an Aston Villa fan when it comes to soccer. So obviously when Randy Lerner brought the Villa, it just seemed a pretty natural thing to then follow his American football team. Little did I know that I was then signing up for years of misery at the time from both of my teams. Before you say it, Kieran, I'll get it in there myself. But yeah, that was why the Browns. I mean, like I say, I fell in love with the NFL first. Really, just loved the speed of the game. I loved the hard hitting. Loved the sort of athleticism that was on display. For me, it's the ultimate team sport. I love the fact that you get, some 5'5" skinny dude running through the backfield, and then some, 6'6" wide bloke who's, 400 pounds in the middle of the offensive line or the defensive line trying to stop him. For me, it's just a fabulous team game. So absolutely love it. Love the strategy of it and all the rest of it. But yeah, that was the reason for the Browns. It was just a natural sort of follow on from my sports following in the UK, unfortunately.
Yeah, as a Reading FC fan, I'm very sympathetic to losing ways in footy. But as an NFL fan, did you? Look, I'm a Patriots fan, so I've been spoiled over the last 20 or so years. Do you feel like being a Browns fan sort of gives you greater appreciation every win that comes along? Because as a Patriots fan, we would beat a team. I'm like, whatever, that wasn't exciting. We were meant to beat them. And last year, we lost to a lot of teams that we could have beat or should have beat. And then, obviously, I like to remind Lee that we gave the Chargers an absolute drubbing, 45-0. That was a special teams clinic. But did you feel like after all the it's just mismanaged franchise and there was a lot of dysfunction, do you feel like you have a greater appreciation now for just the stability? And yeah, okay, it was the wild cards, which when the Patriots made in the 2019 season, I was like, what the fuck is this? What's wild card weekend? I've never heard of this before. Matt Castle no, this is Tom Brady? No, it was crazy. So do you feel like even when you played your asses off to get to the wild card, I may add, and then you go in the wild card and absolutely smash a massive rival of yours, do you feel like you have a greater appreciation for that than maybe somebody who's a fan of the Chiefs or the Patriots or a franchise that's always sort of, especially in recent years, always been good?
Yeah, you definitely do get that sense of it. I mean, I wrote an article for the site the day after or a couple of days after that wild card win, and I think I called it a win 13 years in the making. And it was a pleasure to write, to be honest, and one of the best received articles I think I've ever wrote, because it was generally just a story 13 years in the making. I've sat through an awful lot of rubbish, as many Browns fans have. I remember still vividly Christmas Eve, a wide right Chargers field goal to sort of get to 1-14 on the season, and celebrating as though Christmas had come a few hours early, and that was just celebrating the first win of the year, to then obviously follow it up with an 0-16 season. When you have very little success, then you definitely have more of an appreciation when success does come around. And that's going to be the interesting thing now for the Browns, as we've said a few times. There's almost a sense now of expectation. There's almost a sense of, as you just said there, well, you should be beating so and so, oh, you've beaten, for argument's sake, you've beaten Jacksonville. Well done. You've beaten them 24 points to 22, and you've hung on in the last second. You should be trouncing the Jags. Well, the NFL doesn't work like that. We know that. Every win is hard fought. You mentioned a 45-0 drop in there. Let's face it, they are very few and far between. Every game is hard earned, and every win is absolutely something you have to fight tooth and nail for. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see. Certainly from the fan base's perspective, I absolutely think there's definitely a real sense of appreciation from Browns fans. And the same with any franchise. I think when you're having tough times, you strive for these better days, don't you? And obviously, when you get them, you've then obviously got to take full advantage of them. I loved your chat with Bengals captain last week. And he was saying, just turning up in his crazy outfit to the game puts a smile on people's face, and it absolutely does. But nothing will put a smile on the face more than, like you say, Joe Burrow turning that franchise around. And if they can have that effect, then, like you say, you will get even more appreciation for it, because you've had to suffer through some down times. And the NFL should work this way. You should go through ups and downs. That's the way the league's designed. You shouldn't have a team like New England that dominated for as long as they did. That shouldn't happen. It's very, very rare. It'll probably never ever happen again. So as you said there, maybe the Browns have got a 3 to 4 year window now that things should be trending in a positive direction. Everybody wants to be the next dynasty. It doesn't necessarily happen that way. So certainly going to enjoy it while we've got it. But like I said, they've got to still go out there and earn it and prove it. So, that's the next step for them. Can they handle that expectation? And can they go out there and prove that last year wasn't a fluke?
Yeah, and this should never mean for any team as well, just because you finally got over the hump, that they're gonna not try. Because the appreciation I have for Kansas City getting back to a Super Bowl the year after winning one is ridiculous. I don't think people realize how hard that is. People say, "Oh, well, they got Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill, and all these guys," but it's still incredibly hard. You have to fight tooth and nail in some games just for a 1-point win, and getting back to the Super Bowl is incredible. So I think if you guys can, finally reach that level, that'd be massive for Browns fans everywhere. It'd be massive for the city of Cleveland, because I think the city kind of took a hit when LeBron left, and they were like,
Yeah, well, let's face it. I mean, you're closer to it than me. I mean, I keep a little bit of an eye on the Cleveland sports teams because of my Browns affiliation, but I don't think the Indians are going anywhere this year, and I don't think the Cavs are pulling up any trees, are they? So, like you say, it's a football town, and if the Browns do well, let's face it, I think, you saw the parade when the Cavs won that championship. You could times that by whatever number you want to put on it. If the Browns ever won the Super Bowl, the parties would just be incredible. It's a massively passionate town. It's a massively passionate fan base. So yeah, bring it on, mate. Bring it on, indeed. Like you say, the city certainly deserves it, because they've gone through plenty of shit.
Yeah, I was about to say, and I said this to Bengals captain last week. You remember when I said I feel like with the way things are trending, I think the biggest rivalry in the AFC going into the next few seasons will potentially be the Browns versus the Bengals. There's obviously a lot of history there due to, the Bengals creation, but there's never any bad blood. And I feel like that's potentially because of how, I don't want to say historically bad, but how both franchises have had some dysfunction and had trouble winning. But do you think that rivalry heats up the more both teams win, the more both you come accustomed to, making playoff runs and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a potential for it to happen. I think, like you say, you've obviously got two young quarterbacks, that in theory, certainly from both franchises' perspectives, they hope that they're not going anywhere for a long time to come. So that will add its own level of intrigue. The reason, let's be honest, it's not been a rivalry is because, you've got Pittsburgh in the same division. Pittsburgh has always been the Browns' biggest rival. Forget the fact that the Bengals and the Browns are in the same state. It's always been a Pittsburgh-Cleveland rivalry. And let's face it, the Ravens have just been a successful franchise since they've been since they were the Browns, if you like.
Yeah,
For
I was
one of
about to
the
say there's probably
yeah,
some bad blood there, given
yeah,
what
yeah.
happened with the teams.
Yeah, so that's the strange thing in terms of that Bengals and Browns rivalry. I just think it's the Steelers historically is the biggest rival, just because of, obviously, like you say, they were successful franchises for a long time. There's obviously the rivalry and the sort of hatred, if you like, that's there from the bad blood, and obviously people don't forget that the Browns were taken away from Cleveland for that 4 to 5 year period. So there's always that hatred there. So although it's a divisional game, that's probably the reason it's not viewed as this massive rivalry. But like you say, if both teams all of a sudden start churning out wins and the games between the two become really important, then yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, they certainly have got the potential to be some ding dong battles. And let's throw Lamar in there. My views on Lamar. I don't think he's ever going to be the world's greatest quarterback in terms of a pure passer. I think everyone that thinks he's going to develop massively are probably kidding themselves. But he's very, very good at what he does. I've always said that. I just think the Ravens have got to commit to doing what he does well. When they have committed to what he does well, they win games. That's why they went on that massive run at the end of last season.
Hard to get the wide receiver talent when you want to play to Lamar Jackson's strengths, though.
Exactly, mate. But that's the decision ultimately the Ravens have got to make, isn't it? They're either going to have to play this way and commit to the Lamar Jackson and say, well, that's the way that we're going to play. And like you say, the sort of outside threat is almost more of a decoy for the vast majority of the time. Because we're going to be concentrating on running the ball and we're going to concentrate on throwing the ball over the middle more often than not. If they want to change the style and they want more of a pocket passer and all the rest of it, they're unfortunately going to have a decision to make on Lamar Jackson. So that's for them to worry about anyway. That's not really too much of my concern, to be fair. But potentially the division could have some excellent rivalry because they're all of a similar age, aren't they? Burrow, Mayfield, and Jackson. And that's why I say about Pittsburgh. Until they get the heir to the throne sorted, so to speak, that's the obvious sort of weak point for them moving forward, isn't it? So all eyes on what happens there because they've obviously dominated the division. To be fair, as much as we both have a very strong disliking to them, let's face it, they've been massively successful, through the Mike Tomlin era and Big Ben and all the rest of it. So be interesting to see what happens once they make that transition. But yeah, certainly the Bengals trending in the right direction. Hopefully, at the same time, the Browns are as well.
Yeah, that'd be fun, especially. And obviously, you mentioned Lamar Jackson still young. I mean, he's younger than Joe Burrow, so it just speaks to how crazy he was that he was winning an MVP the year that Joe Burrow's winning a Heisman. So he's clearly very talented. But probably a final question that this might make Browns fans sad, but do you wonder what could have been if the team never moved? Because we know Bill Belichick was there and he obviously drafted Ray Lewis and stuff before he left and the team got relocated. Do you ever wonder what could have been?
It's probably not a great question for me to answer because my fandom's obviously really started, like I say, 13 years ago. So I've never known the Browns other than their current makeup of them. I could only really speak hypothetically as if to say, if the team went away now and came back in 5 years' time again, so the situation replayed itself. I can only imagine that it must be, it's just an unthinkable pill to have to swallow. If I'm being honest, it's obviously a different setup to the way that English football works, and that's the only comparison I can give it. But you just think you take away something that you've followed all your life, you've gone there every weekend, you're taking your kids there, and all of a sudden it doesn't exist anymore. It must be the world's strangest feeling because we all love our sports teams. At the end of the day, for a lot of us, it's what keeps us going through the week, isn't it? Looking forward to
Yeah, exactly.
who were playing the weekend. I think it was important that when they did come back, they kept the name, they kept all of the historical records, they kept obviously the tradition of the uniforms and that type of thing. If you go back now and you watch, some of the great games that the Browns had in the '80s, when let's face it, they should have been winning Super Bowls. you wouldn't know if you didn't know the story that it was a different franchise back then, because it all looks the same, and I think that's important. In terms of they haven't come back and all of a sudden are wearing different coloured uniforms and that type of thing. So I can only imagine for the elder fans in the fan base, the sort of sheer relief when it was announced that they were going to come back. Um, you know, but like I say, for the sort of newer fans like me, like I say, I can't really comment too much on what it must have felt like. I can only imagine what it must have felt like, certainly. But fingers crossed that the successful times are coming back as well. Now that's the main thing.
I'm glad you switched your uniforms as well. I think you're up there with Chargers and Bucks now for having the best uniforms in the league. I know it's like the throwback style, but they just look so clean, and it brings not really a retro feel, but the simplistic look. I really didn't like the 2016 uniforms with Browns plastered all over them. I prefer the simpler look. I'll actually put it up here. You can see Baker Mayfield in it. I just, the look is a lot cleaner and a lot simpler. So that gives the iconic Browns sort of, historical feel to it.
It feels as though the franchise is on the right path, mate. That's the main thing. I think that to some people will be listening to this now thinking, what the bloody hell are these two going on about? What difference does it make what they're wearing? And in the grand scheme of things, it probably makes zero difference. I get that. But from the optics point of view, what it was the franchise realising that they'd made a mistake. I said I started supporting the Browns when Randy Lerner, brought Aston Villa. Obviously, since then, Randy Lerner's sold the Cleveland Browns, and Jimmy Haslam's come in as an owner, and he's been very trigger happy. He's moved on from head coaches far too quickly. They've made a lot of poor decisions. The uniform was another in a series of poor decisions. But they had the balls at least to put their hands up and say, yeah, we've got this wrong. And they've listened to what the fans wanted. And I think as much as anything, it comes back to what we were just talking about there. It's that importance of the identity of this team. And it's sort of being, back to the sort of roots, if you like, of this team. That sort of, as you say, that almost college look with Cleveland sort of splashed all over it. It didn't look great. It looked amateurish. And, ultimately, like I say, in the grand scheme of things, did it make a tangible difference? Probably not. But obviously, you're there to be shot at then, aren't you? If it's not going well, people can then say, well, yeah, you played in school uniforms. You're gonna, you're being treated like schoolboys essentially. So
you dress like an arena team. You're going to play like one.
Exactly, mate. Exactly that. So yeah, the uniform thing, although symbolic in a lot of ways, was an important step. And fair play to them in terms of actually, seemingly finally getting a coaching hire right. That's the single biggest thing. Since Jimmy brought the Browns, we've gone through far too many head coaches. Far too many head coaches. I followed the Browns for 13 years. The Steelers have had one head coach in that time.
Yeah, it's crazy. You've had, 800 quarterbacks as well throughout that time. So,
well, there's that infamous shirt, isn't there, with all of the quarterbacks named on it. There's a famous shirt that somebody. It's obviously been mocked up, but yeah, list of every quarterback
should be in the Hall of Fame in Canton.
It should do, mate. Yeah, Johnny Manziel, Seneca Wallace, Jake Delhomme, Colt McCoy. It's a who's who of who shouldn't play quarterback in the NFL, mate. But hopefully, Baker Mayfield is the last person to add to that list for a very long time.
It's a who's who of who the fuck is that guy. But yeah, that is all we've got time for today, guys. Thank you very much for joining me, Shaun. Is there anything you'd like to plug?
Well, it would seem unfair, mate, not to plug our own full 10 yards college draft guide. I'm sure you're probably going to plug that yourself, but I will give you a tip of the cap, mate, because you, along with a number of the lads, have beavered away over the film tape and have put together a really comprehensive guide for everybody to get their hands on ahead of draft night. Only 3 weeks away now, or less than 3 weeks away now. We'll be into the second round in 3 weeks' time, won't we? So available now as well in hardback, as well as I'll say hardback, certainly in physical copy. I don't know if it's a hardback or not, but it's certainly available in a physical copy as well as the digital. And as with everything, full 10 yards, money invested back into the UK grassroots game. So not only are you getting a good product, you're donating some of your hard-earned money to a good cause as well. Let's get some players, officials, and everything into the UK game. Let's keep growing the game over here. So hopefully we get more coverage of the NFL off the back of it, mate. So yeah, tip of the cap to you and the boys, mate. Well done on an excellent product, mate. Pleasure to be associated with it, and thanks for having us on, mate.
Yeah, appreciate that. We did put a lot of work into that, and we're really happy with how it turned out. And we're, once the draft's over, we're ready to jump back in, getting one done for next year for everyone to get their chops into back even better. Just for the audio listeners, if you want to give out your handle, I know it's on screen here for the video, but if you want to give it out for the people just listening.
Yeah, so if you want to interact with me personally, it's at Shaun_F10Y, and obviously get us at full 10 yards as well. I'm one of the few that has the fingers in that account as well. So yeah, hit us up on socials if you want to chat ball or Browns at any time.
And I am the Himbo F10Y. You can catch me slagging off people from Pittsburgh, basically, especially after the Cincinnati Reds had a great triumph against them in the baseball this week. I'm pretty much a Reds fan account at this point, so if you're into baseball as well, come over and check us out. Full10yards.com for articles, at Full10yards on the Twitter, and Full10yards on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and very soon TikTok. But thank you for joining me, Shaun, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Kick it and go, kick it and go. We'll stiff on, spin move, in zone, let's go. Off the sideline, a touchdown,